Welcome, everyone. Give people just a few seconds here to join us before we get started. I know we're catching everyone right at the tail end of lunch hour, probably. So. Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for the Edge webinar. We're very glad that you have joined us. For those of you who this is your first time on the Edge webinar, just kind of give you a quick rundown of the format. It consists of about a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll open the floor for questions at the end. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free. There's a chat button and a Q&A button at the top of your screen there. Feel free to type it in there. You can raise your hand if you want. I'll be monitoring all of those things throughout their presentation. That way we can address any questions and that way we can address them right away and not just move on from them. So feel free. We encourage questions throughout the presentation. I will go ahead at this time and turn it over to our presenters to do a quick introduction and get started with their presentation.
All right. Thank you, Jody. My name is Darren Walters. I'm the sales engineer here with Nex-Tech. And with me today, I'm happy to have Cody Clark, who's our senior territory manager with Hubble. And the reason we really wanted to put this together is a couple reasons. Number one, I think cabling is not the most exciting thing to talk about. So we wanted to, Cody and I will inject some excitement into it for you. But we really want to emphasize the idea of really checking on your infrastructure, seeing what you have, how it's hooked up in order to move forward with your technology. And so that was the big purpose today. We work with a lot of schools and hospitals and people that are changing their technology pretty frequently. And we just want to make sure that the infrastructure is caught up with the devices that you want to use. So the big question, that we wanted to ask was, why do I need to check my cabling? It's super important to evaluate your datacom infrastructure, basically to ensure network reliability of your current system, and make sure we've got security and performance. So, there's some quick changing technology when it comes to AV, wireless, PoE devices, VoIP, not to mention security cameras and all those other ancillary devices. So we want to make sure that, that we can keep up with the devices that we want to put on. We want to avoid costly downtime and troubleshooting, making sure that our infrastructure is solid, making sure that the quality of our connections is good, making sure that if we're a bigger facility, that our intercloset connectivity is what it needs to be, and everything above the ceiling and in the wall, we want to make sure is secure and ready to go. The biggest really takeaways is, I've got a lot of examples and we really see it in K through 12 where, customers are wanting to upgrade APs and they have increased PoE requirements. Customers are looking to maybe do IP paging. Customers are maybe wanting to go to VoIP or especially with security cameras. And, we've had a lot of customers that just, the technology is really outrunning their infrastructure to handle it. And so we want to make sure to keep that up.
So a couple of the core pieces of having a good installation and high performance quality system is structured cabling. We need to adhere to the industry standards and best practices from the IEE, ANSI, TIA, and EIA. A couple of those items are like organized pathways, logical cable pathways that are easy to manage, making sure that we keep clearances for access to those pathways for future use and maintenance, and separating away from things that cause interference that's going to negatively impact our performance of our system. Implementing or using standardized connectors and components simplifies the system, adding and adjusting your electronics inside of it. Implementing proper grounding and bonding. This is an important one because of avoiding potential damage to your equipment, but it also impacts the performance whenever the trays and items and shielding are not properly grounded and bonded. And then using cables for properly rated for the applications they're installed. Examples of that are in wet environments, slab on grade, things like that, conduits running through the slab, you're going to have moisture and condensation. You want to make sure you're using a OSP or outdoor rated cable that's going to be able to stand up to that moisture, whereas like a plenum cable would not. And then comprehensive documentation, maintaining up-to-date records for the entire installation. Big parts of that are making sure you have cable labels, the pathways, the routing, and then all of your test results and documentation, especially that last one for your warranty or your service work applications. Visual and physical inspections important to do whenever you're evaluating your network. Cable management's a big one. You want to make sure that you're neatly bundled. You've got a clean setup. Want to make sure your routing's properly done, avoiding kinks, sharp bends that are going to negatively impact the performance of that cable. One thing you see often that happens is overfilling of pathways. That causes a lot of issues, including a lot of increased heat there whenever you have too many PoE cables running through an area, and then just being able to service it without causing damage or accidental disconnections. Proper labeling, again, that kind of helps with whenever you're tracking down your patch cords, making sure that you're not unplugging or plugging something into the wrong connection. Connection quality, inspecting all the connections. This is somewhere where you can catch an issue before it arises. If you notice that they're not properly supported being attached to the back of the patch panel, those cables are under stress over time, that's going to possibly cause you a disconnection or a network drop, which can be very costly and time consuming. Environmental conditions, this is a big one, making sure that you don't have physical hazards or moisture around that critical equipment and systems, making sure it's well ventilated, keeping the area clean. Grounding and bonding, like we just talked about. One of the big ones there is if you're in a hospital system or somewhere where you're using a shielded cable solution, if they have not properly grounded that cable, it'll actually end up causing you negative impacts on your network instead of improving the performance of it. So making sure that's done properly, and then verifying your cable ratings. So that's not just from a, um, you know, making sure that the product performs as it should. It's also a code requirement. So if you're in a plenum rated airspace, you have to have a plenum rated cable. Otherwise, you're against code, and the inspectors are going to make you replace it.
Yeah, and one thing that we do just to add into that, because we hear about either plenum or non-rated plenum cable or non-plenum rated cable. Here at Nex-Tech, we try just to use plenum rated cabling all the time. It does a couple things for us. Number one, it really allows us to stock, if we're talking about Cat 6, it allows us to stock one box of cable. We don't have to have two different or three different versions of it. And we get into situations with some of the older buildings, some stuff that we go back in and retrofit. And, we might go through, a run from the closet to, a classroom or something, and we might be able to do 90% of it without having to kind of break those plenum rules. But we've got one little chunk that we need to break it. So we don't want to run that risk. And so we install plenum for pretty much everything. It's just a touch bit more per box, but it saves us a lot on the back end. So that's kind of how we do it. And here's this picture of, I won't tell you what customer this is or if I got it off the internet, but we see a lot of closets like this. Now, none are quite this bad because we've got some different colored cables, but this is common. It looks ridiculous. It looks like a plate of spaghetti, but it is absolutely common. And so, to come in, if you're an IT person or a business owner or somebody that has to deal with technology and trace down maybe why a PC is not connecting, or saying, hey, I don't have a light on my access point, and you have to come in and try and track it down from this, it's going to be a huge issue. On the reverse of that, if I can come in and look at this, then I can see all my cables, I can see all my panels, I can see the labeling on everything. And so it makes it a little bit easier to manage. And what we try and do, numbering scheme wise, is obviously this is a picture of a rack, and we've got a couple patch panels in there. And all the patch panels are numbered with port numbers. If we've got a 48 port patch panel, it's 1 through 48. So when we number things, what we want to try and do, and we encourage other people to do, is say, okay, this is closet A. Maybe you've only got one closet. So this is closet A, rack 1, patch panel A, port 47. So that way you can go to any jack in the building and you can look at the jack label and say, okay, this is closet A, rack 1, panel A, port 42. And you can go right to this rack and see if that thing is patched in or not. And so we try and do that on all our new installations and make sure that other people try and follow that same numbering scheme. But having your rack layouts neat and manageable, visible, it will save you a lot of trouble down the line. So
Keeps a service technician from tripping over a cable and taking down your network.
well, based on that picture, you could lose a kid in there. So
So going into pathways, this is a good image identifying something very well done. It's keeping the systems organized. Everything's neatly dressed. You've got proper separation from your electrical systems, and it's going to be very easy to move, add, and change things in the future. Some industry standards for structured cabling, fiber optic installation standards, TIA 568. Important for this would be like your testing. So this is going to run you through how you should properly test your fiber optic cabling and make sure that it's working properly. Organized logical pathways, easy to manage. Again, like we just talked about in that picture, it's very easy to do moves, adds, and changes whenever the pathways are done properly. Also making sure that you have enough room for expansion in there and you're not going to run out after the initial installation and have to do new pathways and that for your next future project or addition. Proper cabling, labeling, and documentation, like we talked about, the use of standardized connectors and components, and then the implementing proper grounding and bonding. All of these are covered in those standards. So if you have a question about the right way to do it, the proper way to do it, you have a reference there to go back to.
yeah, and to kind of expand from what Cody said, our relationship with Hubble, we at Nex-Tech use Hubble premise solutions for end to end. So we use their patch cables, we use their jacks, their face plates, the cable that's in the wall, the patch panels, the racks, and the patch cables at the other end. And so part of our relationship with Hubble is that we're a part of their certified installer program and have been for probably close to a quarter of a century. And so what that allows us to do, it allows us to, when we get done installing new cabling, it allows us to test it, label it, certify it, and we can submit those test results to Hubble, as well as a general layout of kind of what we did and how we did it and the customer information. And we've got a 25-year warranty on that solution. And so if we have a product defect or if there's something wrong with the way Nex-Tech did it, then we will fix it at no charge to the customer. And 25 years seems like a long time, but we've actually had a lot of customers that they've had maybe Johnny in a truck come by and run some new cables for them. They have trouble with them. They use I don't want to say cheap parts, inexpensive materials, and they just don't hold up. And so you'd be surprised how many cable problems that that are out there, and that we try and make sure don't happen. And the fact that Hubble has our back in order to have your back as a customer is a huge deal. So part of what we talked about is the cable testing or cable certification. And this is a picture of one of the devices that's used in testing some fiber in this picture. But cable testing and certification is extremely important. And we talked about how, we want our labeling system to, we want to walk to any jack and be able to tell what closet, what rack, what patch panel, and what port it is. And when we test and certify those runs, we will label that test report with those actual jacks. So if somebody comes in and, on your wiring system that's certified, and you have a wireless tech come in and say, hey, there's a problem with this cable. We know that it's tested and certified, and if there's any trouble with it, then somebody probably got into it and messed with it because it's all tested and good, and it tested out to the rating of the cable that it was supposed to. But there's a couple different types of tests that we do or that can be done. One of them is just kind of a key performance and continuity test. So this is just your basic test to perform that the cable is going to work. We got connectivity from end to end. So what it does, we will test wire map, which makes sure that all the pinouts are okay and in the right order, and we could either see or we understand and didn't forget our color code. So basically, it's wire map to make sure that there's nothing crossed up or in the wrong color slot. Continuity in shorts, it tests if there's an open or a break. So if pins, 2 through 8 are connected, but one's hanging loose on one end, then it's going to show us an open, and we can verify that it's all connected properly. The final thing that's pretty important is we can test cable length. So if we put the test equipment in one end and the other end at the rack, when we run that test, we can say, okay, this is, 250 feet. So it falls within the threshold of what we want, or for some reason, this one's like 400 and some. And, in some installations, you'll have some that are a little bit longer. Then you can kind of make decision, okay, do I need to do something different, or do I just document that this run exceeds the limit, and it probably won't certify.
So like Darren said, that previous testing, it identifies a lot of common problems during installation. And as a technician out in the field, we used to always carry 4 pair testers, which perform those tests that Darren just went over. And it's a good first check to identify common problems. Now, what it doesn't do is tell you, is your data going to be transferred properly with minimal packet loss and issues? And that is why we have certification devices. And a certification test is required for the warranty, like Darren was just talking about, because that's what's telling you that your system's actually going to perform the way it was supposed to, not that just it was installed and the connections were made properly. So some of those things that they test are like attenuation, which is your signal loss over the length of that cable, or crosstalk, both near and far end and alien. So are the pairs within that cable crossing over and causing too much interference with each other that it's going to cause packet loss and issues with your data? Or on alien crosstalk, are you having other cables around your bundle of cables or your pathway that are causing interference onto that cable that's going to cause you issues with your data transmission? So it's just taking it to another level. And for any new installation, anything that you're not troubleshooting, I'd highly recommend you doing a certification test over a basic 4-pair test, especially at those higher performance Cat 6, Cat 6A solutions.
Yeah. So again, in keeping with the theme of really giving you guys some information in order to kind of just take a quick snapshot at what you have, like what is my cabling? What does it look like? Some of the most common things that we'll see or things that we'll find is there's really no room for expansion, either within pathways or within the communication closet. And now we know that it might just be your coat closet. Your stuff could be maybe down in a basement. Um, in a garage or in a separate building, and you might have multiple closets in your facility if you're a hospital or a school or a larger facility like that. But no room for expansion, either within the pathways above the ceiling or inside your communications closet is the biggest thing that we see. It's a huge problem. People underestimate how much room they need for their telecom gear and their network gear. So they'll try and just stuff as much as they can into as small a space as they can, and you start getting into heat problems and all kinds of things. We mentioned it multiple times, and that's because it's super important, but improper grounding and bonding is a huge deal. We need to make sure that we've got a good earth ground in the communications closet and not just relying on the power outlet to do it for us. We need to make sure that the rack is grounded as well as any other equipment. It could be your switches, your wireless controller, your phone system, your paging amplifier, anything that's in there needs to be grounded in order to protect it from getting smacked. Infrastructure being exposed to damage during maintenance by other trades. When we get in and we see a lot of new cabling installs that have issues and problems, and well, the HVAC guy might have moved some stuff or pinched it or squished it or hacked through some of it. So just don't assume that just because it's above the ceiling that it's completely safe. We see a lot of schools that come in and adding stuff, or the fire alarm guy, cuts your cable to use it for something he's doing. We have a problem. So, infrastructure, fastening or bundling cables too tight is a common problem, and it's super important when we start talking about 6A and some of the PoE things. And I've seen installations where to the naked eye, it might look really nice. They've got all the cable bundles dressed in there, and they've just got the squeeze put on them with some tie wraps. And once you do that about 30 or 40, 50 times as it leaves the equipment room, it can definitely cause some issues and some heat and some alien crosstalk and interference. So that's one thing we want to look for too. We try and use the Velcro straps as much as possible to put the least amount of strain and pressure on that cable bundle as we can.
Yeah, and those top three items, I would say, if they're not done properly at the beginning of your installation, they're inevitably going to cost you a lot of money down the road. So it is better to do it up front correctly. So going into identifying your cables, pretty standard. Every cable jacket should have these markings on them. You should easily be able to identify in your copper whether it's Cat 5e, Cat 6, 6A, Cat 7, maybe Cat 3 if it's a really old system, identifying that you're not going to be able to run data on it. Shielding type, most of the time you're going to see UTP listed, unshielded twisted pair. It's the most common cable out there, but there's definitely other standard or different jacket types that can be used out there for specific applications. Again, OSP and stuff like that for jacket material is very important whenever it comes to what environment you're in, both from a legal standpoint and a code standpoint, but also making sure that that cable is going to last longer than a year or so, being exposed to what it's maybe what it shouldn't be exposed to. It's going to have the manufacturer's information on there, usually the name, product, and serial number. So this is going to be important, like when we talk about the warranty and claim issues, that manufacturer is going to want to know what lot that came from, see if maybe they had other warranty complaints from that same lot that they produced, if it's an isolated incident or a bigger issue. So, and then your footage marking, great for installation purposes and knowing how much you've got left on your box. Um, so this kind of gives you a breakdown of a specific cable. So it's going to give you your gauge of wire as well, how many megahertz it's rated up to. And then on your fiber cables, and this is kind of an image, it's blue cable with black writing, so it's a little bit harder to tell, but you can see there it says 6A UTP, has the manufacturer part number on there, gauge of wire.
Yeah, so if any of you on the call, even if you just take a picture of it, put your phone up in the ceiling and get a picture of the words, then email it to us or send it to us and we can tell you what it is if you can't decipher it. So
Fiber cables, very similar, few differences in it. It's going to indicate single mode or multi-mode versus category. If it's multi-mode, it should be indicating OM1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. OM1 and OM2 being legacy fibers that probably need replaced. Single mode fibers are typically rated as OS1, OS2. There's not really a reason to replace an OS1 for an OS2, and OS2 is pretty much all you're going to come across anymore when buying new fiber. The fiber strand count's important. Jacket material, like we just talked about, it's identified slightly differently. It'll be an OF for optical fiber, and then an N or a C for non-conductive or conductive, identifying whether you need to ground it or not, and then riser or plenum for the airspace. Or in some cases, LSZH, low smoke, zero halogen. Manufacturer's information, like we just went over, performance specifications will sometime be listed on there, and then your cable marker footage.
yeah, and here's another picture.
Yeah, and this one has an indoor-outdoor rating, so it's a little bit different than what was shown in the slides, but then it's suited for UV and wet environments, but also plenum-rated airspaces. So there are combined cable types. And then with fiber, you can usually identify the series of fiber based on the color coding. So outdoor cables are often black. The indoor outdoors that we just showed you, they are color coded. But when they're black, you're going to have to refer to the jacket. But if they're color coded, you should be able to easily identify, are they an OM3, OM4 laser optimized? Are they a single mode if they're yellow?
So the last thing that we want to kind of end on is just, a lot of people might have had their cabling in their building for years and years and years, and they're like, well, what's the current cabling that we need to be using? Like, what's the best of breed, or what are people installing today?
The way I would answer that is pretty much Cat 6 would be a minimum recommendation for any modern network system being installed. And a lot of the big drive for that is the power, the PoE application. So you have more and more devices, your wireless access point, cameras. I think we're going to move towards TVs being PoE powered and that. So having that category 6 cable there gives you a bigger gauge of wire, improves on your voltage drop, and better heat dissipation. So it performs better in PoE applications.
And then just to step up from that.
So on the Cat 6A, it'd be great if you can do your entire network in Cat 6A. You'll be future proof, but we know that there's a higher cost that goes along with that. And sometimes the project budgets won't allow. So at least on specific applications, and those being wireless access and your audio visual applications, I would really push for a Cat 6A. That increased bandwidth there and capacity for the high speed wireless communications or the video streaming, it's going to be essential. And I think that is one that'll be something you'll be replacing or regretting potentially down the road if you don't do it now. And then as far as fiber goes, the main thing I'd say about that is just OM1's legacy. I know a lot of people out there have OM1 62.5 fiber within their building, and they just keep adding on to it because they want to stay consistent. At some point, I'd recommend ripping that Band-Aid off and going to an OM3, OM4, or switching to a single mode solution. You can't mate OM1 fibers with OM3, OM4. You're going to have equipment that's not going to be working with them. You're going to have extra cost involved in getting mode conditioning patch cords and things like that. So I'd definitely be looking to go to an OM3, OM4 solution or a single mode if that's a better fit for your application.
Yeah, and I know from a Nex-Tech perspective, pretty much everything that we do, whether it's inside someone's building or whether it's outside getting service to them, or whether it's connecting schools together or hospitals or community colleges, we use single mode exclusively in our network. It's got the most distance capabilities and it's got the most upside for bandwidth. So we want to take that same kind of technology and that same kind of capacity and use that inside the buildings as well. So with that, I know it's pretty fast. 30 minutes goes by pretty fast, but if there's any questions, do we have any questions, Jody?
We do not have any in the chat or the Q&A right now. Let me open this up here. Feel free to unmute yourself. You've got control over your mic, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. I will follow up with their contact information after the webinar is concluded here. And if you have any additional questions, definitely reach out. Like Darren said, if you want to send a picture and have some questions of your current wiring, we'd be happy, Cody or Darren would be happy to go over some of that with you. I do look like somebody's typing a question here. Thanks for this presentation. Our environment is always changing and isn't getting any younger.
Just like
Very
me.
True.
No, and we take a vested interest because we do cabling, but we also we sell devices and wireless and cameras, and we want that your guys' networks to be able to handle all the new devices and take you down the road. So
absolutely. Well, thank you guys, both Cody and Darren, for taking time to share this information and your expertise on this topic. You guys are both very knowledgeable, so we appreciate that. Like I said, I will include their contact information in a follow-up email to all the participants. There's a ton of information covered, so do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. We are happy to have those conversations with you. So. All right, with that, I'll go ahead and conclude. We will have another webinar. It'll be the second Wednesday of November. I will also include that information in the follow-up email, so get registered for that. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.